The story of his next projects begins in the past.
It's confusing.
It was the mid-90s. The young couple was traveling in France and decided to cross the La Manche. The young man obsessively fantasized over a screen adaptation of the events which surrounded that place during the Second World War. Like any beginning director, Chris was planning on turning the world of cinema upside down, which is why he wanted to make a film with no script, where hundreds of actors would be given guidelines, but would be allowed complete freedom of improvisation on stage. Emma then first displayed her producer's grasp of reality and told the young man that the idea would never work. 20 years later, Nolan finally accepted his wife's opinion and wrote the script. It was only 76 pages, the shortest in Christopher's career, despite the fact that Christopher considered the evacuation of Dunkirk to be the turning point of the war.
If this evacuation had not been a success, Great Britain would have been obliged to capitulate, and the whole world would have been lost, or would have known a different fate. The Germans would undoubtedly have conquered Europe. The US would not have returned to war. It is a true point of rupture in war and in history of the world. Militarily, it is a defeat. On the human plane, it is a colossal victory.
Historians, however, did not agree with the director. Great Britain had 3 million soldiers, and only 10% were on the shore of Dunkirk. The fleet controlled the La Manche, and the Nazis had lost many of their boats in Norway. Even if the Germans had captured England, the Queen's army would have regrouped in Canada. Plus, the Reichstag was planning an invasion of the Soviet Union, which basically excludes the possibility of a simultaneous attack on two fronts. Despite their difference of opinion, Nolan executed the evacuation itself in painstaking detail. Still, he decided to base the action on imaginary characters, rather than on the memories of eyewitnesses of the battle. Christopher was so taken with the project that he invited the film crew, set decorators, and film crew who had been with him since the first Batman movie, before it even got the green light from the studio. Nathan Crowley was already in France, and planning the production design while Christopher and Warner Brothers met to sign the contract. The team got permission to film on the very beach where the evacuation took place.
The movie is absolutely informed by the real place, more than any picture I can think of.
A pier was erected on top of a monument dedicated to the event.
The original foundations of the mall were still there, so we built on top of that. I think without those foundations, we don't think we could have done it.
The town authorities gave the film crew complete freedom to shoot on their streets, and residents of Dunkirk were extras, helped build the set, and worked as administrators. It took over a year and a half for the set designers to fully immerse themselves in the era. While they were busy, Christopher began auditioning the cast. Having studied the history, he realized that most of the soldiers on the beach had been young recruits. Nolan decided to find young actors without serious experience to reflect the reality on the screen.
We really were talking about 17, 18, 19-year-old actors, and that concept was really energizing.
The casting director sent him hundreds of auditions, which is when the director saw his lead, Fionn Whitehead.
He has an old-fashioned face. The kind of face that makes you believe he could have been alive in that period.
In the same way, he chose Tom Glyn Carney, Jack Lowden, Anura Bernard, and Harry Styles. When choosing Harry, the director didn't even suspect that the beginning actor was a world-famous pop star and soloist of One Direction. When they met in person, Harry charmed the director so much that he compared the choice with choosing Heath Ledger to play Joker. The critics, however, were equally skeptical of this choice. Chris didn't stop at young talent. He invited Cillian Murphy to his project for the 5th time.
I'm not going back.
And he even found a role for Michael Caine, though almost no one noticed it. Michael voiced the officer who gave orders to the British pilots.
Stay down at 500 feet to leave fuel for 40-minute fighting time over Dunkirk.
I wanted very much to squeeze him in here. It's a bit of a nod to his character in Battle of Britain. And also, it's Michael. He has to be in all of my films after all.
Another old friend was not so happy about a reunion. Tom Hardy wasn't excited about the idea of hiding behind a mask yet again, but Chris explicitly wanted him for the role of Farrier. The director believed that Hardy was able to communicate every emotion imaginable using only his eyes, something he had noticed while filming the third Batman movie.
I broke you.
When Tom heard the reason, he agreed to take the role. The last to be cast were Kenneth Branagh and Mark Rylance. Mark took his preparation very seriously. Every day for a whole month, he would go out to sea on a boat and listen to radio archives of the war.
You should be at home!
Well, there won't be any home if we allow a slaughter across the channel.
At the end of May 2016, Nolan began shooting. The director literally led the team through fire and water. Christopher brought to life risky ideas, the bare minimum of computer graphics, real airplanes and ships, and of course, thousands of extras. But in order to depict such a number of people, the production designers had to get creative. In the wide shots, the actors were surrounded by cardboard silhouettes.
It's a great old school effect. Chris had kind of said a few times, let's do it like they would have done it before the technology existed.
As for the events in the water, the actors were carried by the same 20 ships which evacuated the British soldiers in the 40s. Hoyt van Hoytema didn't fail to amaze this time either. He walked the length of Dunkirk beach with a 60-pound camera on his shoulder.
I really wanted to make that camera work as any other camera you would use.
Filming the air battles was a separate challenge altogether. The team rarely used models, and mostly used real airplanes from that time period.
Spitfires, George. Greatest plane ever built.
3 Spitfires costing $6 million apiece were provided by American billionaire Dan Friedkin. His collection is second only to one person in the world, the Queen of England. Dan himself flew the plane in the landing sequence, and since the tide was coming in, they only had 45 minutes to shoot the scene. Friedkin's Spitfire was the first plane to land on Dunkirk beach since the times depicted in the movie. Nolan was planning on using that scene for the finale, but when he rewatched the material, noticed the mute scene in the train.
It brings you back to this personal moment. He's trying to process the words he's just read from this very eloquent politician and trying to reconcile that with his experience. Hopefully the audience is trying to do the same thing through his eyes.
They finished filming in the beginning of September, and the movie went to editing. Lee Smith was given 50 hours of material, from which he made 16 versions of the film. Christopher's main goal was to reflect the difference in time between land, water, and sky. Events are shown simultaneously in the movie, though they occur at different speeds. Hans Zimmer's soundtrack added to the suspense. Nolan gave the composer a recording of a wristwatch ticking and suggested that he make it the central piece of the musical composition. Zimmer heeded the request, and the sound can be heard throughout the whole film, stopping only when the main characters leave the shore of Dunkirk. Dunkirk premiered on the 13th of July, 2017. Veterans who saw the film said that the film accurately represented their memory of the events. Their only remark was regarding the loudness of the explosions, which they said were much quieter on the beach. Over the next 3 months, the film received rave reviews, made $500 million at the box office, and received 8 Academy Award nominations. Lee Smith won an Oscar for Best Film Editing.
Dunkirk, Lee Smith.
And the film won 2 more Oscars in Sound Editing and Sound Mixing. Unfortunately, luck favored neither Hans Zimmer nor Nathan Crowley, and Hoyt van Hoytema lost to Roger Deakins. Christopher was nominated for the first time as a director, but was beaten by Guillermo del Toro, whose Shape of Water also won Best Picture, leaving Dunkirk in the dust.
We shall never surrender.
Three years later, Christopher's 11th feature film will be released in the autumn of 2020.
All I have for you is a word. Tenet.
Tenet is an epic undertaking in the director's career, with a budget of over $200 million, and the participation of Hoyt van Hoytema promises a visual feast. The story tells of a secret agent who tries to prevent the Third World War with the help of time travel.
Time travel? No. Inversion.
The film was shot all over the world, from Mumbai to Tallinn, where they even shut down a main highway for a whole month. The main roles are played by John David Washington, Robert Pattinson, and Elizabeth Debicki. Also in the ensemble are Kenneth Branagh, and of course, Michael Caine. Unfortunately, not all of Christopher's friends could join the project. Hans Zimmer was unavailable. He was writing the soundtrack for Denis Villeneuve's Dune. Instead, the composer invited his old friend, Ludwig Göransson, to replace him. Ludwig rose to fame when he received an Oscar in 2018 for his work on Black Panther. Lee Smith, who had worked with Nolan on every film from the first Batman, also couldn't participate because of work on the war drama 1917. So, Jennifer Lame, whose recent hits included Hereditary and Marriage Story, took on the role of film editor. Hollywood entrusts Tenet with the mission to resurrect the movie industry, since after 6 months of quarantine, Nolan's film will be the first major production in theaters all over the world. A fitting mission for the person who has devoted his life to the art of making the impossible a reality.
Hey, do you like our work? Let us know with your like and comment. Push that subscribe button and share with your friends. If you want to support the project financially, become our sponsor on Patreon or YouTube sponsorship. Thank you.